If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members.
And we are back. I'm Chris Evans, the CEO of Survival Dispatch. We've got an awesome crew put together for tonight. I'm going to bring them on stage here shortly. First things first, we're going to get the conflicted question out of the way. For those of you not familiar, conflictedthegame.com. These are questions set in a post-apocalyptic scenario. We read the question at the beginning of the episode, and then everybody in the panel answers at the end of the episode. We want to see, we want to see your answers in the live chat or the comment section down below as well. So let me get the card up here. All righty. So grocery stores and mini marts have been ransacked of all food. Your group is low on food and is in desperate need of resources. What other locations would you start looking for food or possible supplies to barter with? So that's an interesting question. And when we started doing the conflicted questions 2 years ago, maybe something like that, we've actually had this question before, but it's a good one. And right now I'm going through and order everything from the second deck. Anyway, just a quick message from one of our sponsors, and this is on the topic of prepping for your retirement, from Noble Gold, noblegoldinvestments.com. So as you probably know, we have done virtually nothing with gold companies because the little bit that we did do, it wasn't a really good fit. But these guys talk from a prepper mindset, like prepping for your retirement. So a lot of people think their 401k is safe, it's growing, it's going to be enough for your retirement. But the $1 million question, of course, is, well, what if it isn't? So at the end of the day, 401k program, it was never designed to make you successful or wealthy. It was created in a corporate boardroom to shift retirement costs from the employer to you, and that also shift the investment risk onto you as well. And it was essentially designed to keep your money trapped, or we're going to charge you a whole bunch of taxes on it, right? So you end up with an investment that's exposed to Wall Street crashes, inflation, all sorts of uncertainty. But you can take back control of your retirement money and you can convert it to tangible stuff like gold, which is pretty cool. So Noble Gold Investments, they've helped, I don't know how many thousands of people to protect their future by converting part of their retirement savings into physical gold. And if you talk to Noble Gold today, learn how safe and easy it is, I'm sure you'll be impressed with the process. You'll get a wealth protection kit, step-by-step guides to get involved, noblegoldinvestments.com. And they're also doing a cool thing right now. They have a bonus offer where if you sign up with them, they'll send you 2 5-ounce silver America the Beautiful coins. So that is that. Let me bring everybody on stage here. So as you can see, joined by my good friend Mike Glover, former Green Beret, former CIA GRS, and below him, CIA Jeff, surprise, surprise, from the CIA, 26-year operative. And my good friend Randy Nance directly below me, former Green Beret, retired Green Beret, combat wounded vet. And tonight we're going to have an extended version of the daily situation report as far as the terrorist threat is concerned. So as far as I can tell, Randy broke the news last night, was the first person to break the news on the threat to GWOT officers in particular here in the state of Florida. And whatever group he got it from, I haven't been able to find anybody else who jumped on it quite as fast as Randy did last night. So Randy, I'm going to have you just explain it, and then I want to go to Mike and ask for your thoughts on this. Mike, Randy?
Yeah, so the letter was put out by USASOC, which is the Command of Special Forces in the Army, right? United States Special operations command, basically. And so this would go out to all the subordinate units underneath it, which are a lot. And basically it's the duty to warn. And it's talking about they apparently have some sort of intelligence that's letting them know there's a terrorist threat targeting retired senior officials who previously served in the Department of Defense in roles of Syria and Iraq theater. And the current geographic focus of this threat is Florida, which does make sense to me because you have two entities there that have been involved in GWOT since the beginning, and they're right there in Central Florida. So it does kind of make sense because there's a lot of folks from the military that end up retiring down there, certainly your senior folks that, because the jobs down there are kind of licky and chewy type things. You know what I mean? They're not operational, but they can't help the career. And you know, it's kind of a sweeten the pot type of thing. And of course you get to live in Florida. And the only caveat I will say to that is, you know, of all the places, and I was at maybe at least 4 other installations where no one came to visit us. If we were going to visit any of our family, we had to go home. But we moved to Florida and everybody came to visit us. So
Go figure.
that's what it is. A little licky and chewy for military folks, certainly for your senior officials. It's a great job. It's better than going to the Pentagon, I would imagine. And so it makes perfect sense. Also look at the Syria Iraq / thing. And then to me, that talks into more of definitely special operations guys in the last probably 5-10 years, maybe, when really ISIS came about. So that kind of what stands out to me. And it says to all personnel, but honestly, this is kind of one of the briefs you get, not quite like this, but when you're in active duty, they're constantly reminding, hey, look, you know, you need to be smart about what you do, keep your head on a swivel and that kind of thing. So I say it's a big deal because I've never seen quite the warning like this.
Yeah, I'd say so as well. And I think this goes back maybe a little bit further than 10 years because, as I mentioned last night, General Vallely at 70 years old led a force of 400 troops into Syria in 2012. And ever since then, he's been on both AQ and ISIS's hit list. They want to take him out.
Well, we could definitely go all the way back to 2003 when we actually went into Iraq, because it does not mention Afghanistan theater.
Right. Mike Glover, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. I've never seen a release like this either. So I'm just a civilian. Is this that uncommon for public consumption?
To be disseminated broadly, it is less common. I mean, it found its way on social media, but I mean, if you think about it, this was probably disseminated unclassed, and it was something that was disseminated to the force, right? To anybody who was potentially falling in this category on active duty reserve components. But I also think there's a duty for civilians to report this type of thing that seems very narrow. But obviously, if you're an Al-Qaeda operative or you're a proxy arm of anybody in the Islamic jihadist movement, a target's a target, whether it's a retired 4-star or, you know, a retired major. I saw it from my friend Andy Stumpf, who posted it, who's a retired, I think he retired as a captain, or no, not as a captain, 03 or 04 in the Navy. And he's just as big as a target being retired as an opportunity presents itself in Florida on somebody who's active duty. So I would think, like, despite it probably being more narrowly aligned with an intel report that came out, I think it's good to widely disseminate these type of things because we get complacent. I mean, I remember the time early on in the GWOT where we were given orders, grow beards, grow facial hair. And we had, I mean, I thought I was going to be able to wear a beard my entire career. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. This is the perks of the job. But it was because we were being identified as being mill guys. Ranger Battalion got orders that no more high and tights because they were getting haircuts every day. And they were allowed more relaxed grooming standards. The uniform dress and appearance code change in 670-1. I only know this because the Sergeant Major Academy. But the standards changed because they were like, hey, we can't have guys during the GWOT flying in military uniform, which is I mean, just generally speaking, a good rule of thumb. Like, why are you traveling in the middle of the U.S. in uniform? So I think it is real. I think it is serious, and I think it's something that needs to be communicated more broadly to former mill guys who, you know, aren't paying attention, but we're the guys who picked it up on Facebook because we're in these little groups, and then broadly disseminate it widely. Because again, if you're an active duty guy, yeah, you're potentially a target, but the easier target is the millions of former military veterans who serve. Even Jeff would be a target because, you know, between the agency and all the intelligence community, 17 of them, I think now, I think it needs to be done more often.
Yeah, thanks for the insight there, Mike. Jeff, I'm curious, what kind of intel would be required to release this type of notification, as far as, you know, how the veracity of it and the scope?
Well, I would like to think they would have they would get a tip to this, and then they would go out and reach out to recruited assets for confirmation. Maybe even through liaison services, you know, maybe the Jordanians or the Saudis or someone else had confirmed it through their, because, you know, they run their sources, they have their networks as well. So, you know, the Israelis, we you know, corroborate a lot of stuff through the Israelis and vice versa. But I doubt it would be a single source unless it was a really, really well-established source with a track record of good reporting. You wouldn't have one guy that you met in a walk-in room somewhere who says, we're going to do this, and a warning like this would go out. It would have to be verified to a certain extent.
Do you think this is driven, you know, by the Iranians, maybe behind these proxies to get revenge for Soleimani and other ones that we've taken out?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, sadly, there's no shortage of groups that would like to kill Americans. You know, it could be ISIS, it could be the Iraqis, it could be the Iranians. You know, it could be the old Syrian Ba'athist. It could be, you know, it could be Hezbollah. It could be Hamas. You know, there's no shortage. But coming out now, the timing of it, yeah, it would lean more towards Iran.
So, quick question before we move on to the next one. Anybody can answer it, has the answer. But is Hezbollah and Hezbollah the same thing? I'm seeing a proliferation of news right now spelled H-I-Z instead of H-E-Z.
It's like Muhammad. There's 1,000 different ways to spell it, but it all means the same thing.
Okay. Yeah.
Hezbollah, yeah.
Okay.
I was the same group.
I was just looking for clarification on that. So okay. Just because, you know, I have the simple process in my mind that I'm going to go to Mike first, then you, Jeff, then Randy. And that way I keep my clockwise circle going. I never lose track of where I am. It has to, when I have to produce for myself, that's how simple it needs to be. But this next one is pretty interesting. So I really like these guys, by the way, American Kinetics at AX Actual number 2. Number 2 is there because X took their account down not too long ago, so they had to start another one. They're in Tampa. I've never met them. I've never corresponded with them. It's like $12.50 a month to get these huge daily reports. Like, I mean, absolutely huge. Hats off to these guys. But this one caught my attention this morning. So, elevated terror threat to U.S. trauma centers and soft targets by ISKP and AQ. This report evaluates current intelligence indicating an elevated threat from Islamic State, Khorasan province, and Al-Qaeda towards U.S. level 1 trauma centers, particularly in tier 2 cities. While the report's primary focus remains on the vulnerability of these medical facilities, recent intelligence confirms that trauma centers are only one element in a broader multi-target campaign. This includes transportation hubs, airports, bus and train stations, and civilian soft targets such as churches and synagogues. And I'll read the bluff, and then I'm coming to you, Mike, to decode some of the language here for us. So the bluff on this is ISKP and AQ are preparing for a campaign of coordinated strikes inside the U.S. with level 1 trauma centers in tier 2 cities appearing as high priority targets. These are not isolated aims. Trauma centers are part of a larger threat matrix that includes transportation infrastructure and religious facilities. While no specific attacks have been confirmed as of July 17th, 2025, intelligence indicators support a moderate to high threat level. U.S. agencies and partners must provide prioritized, layered security and interagency preparedness. So, Mike, first question, stupid question. What would be considered a tier 2 city?
I'm not familiar with that breakdown. I assume they mean by population center and potential threat via the population. So that typically has to do with like BDA assessment, a battle damage assessment, and then the fallout, right? Second and third order effects. You drop a dirty bomb in a tier 1 city versus a tier 2 city, you're going to have different casualty type results. I get the way they're triaging and breaking it down. A lot of that's intel speak. Jeff will know a lot about that language more than I would. What stands out to me about that entire story is just the clarification that via the Ayatollah and his literal threats after there was supposed to be a peace agreement reached. Remember how Iran was in the news for a strong minute, and then all of a sudden it's not in the news, like nobody's talking about it. Well, when nobody was talking about it, the smaller reportings were that the Ayatollah came out and basically put a bounty on the assassination of Trump. Mm-hmm. And so every action arm potential would be activated, right? So now it's like these guys on standby who are operating passively, collecting information and intel with the second, chain of custody orders to execute on. Now's the time. And seemingly, I've seen more activity. We talked about this recently, but there's been a lot more activity in intel reports like this, which just makes sense. You embarrass the Iranians, you bomb them, and you basically smack them down and say, if you do anything other than abide by what we're talking about in peace agreements, we're going to smash you. It doesn't even seem like it happened. We dropped bombs on the last show that we talked about, 200 plus meters in the earth, taking out their infrastructure. If we think that we're going to get away with that unscathed, we're not. And that's what global jihadist markets are really good at, tactical patience. And so when I see something like that, I take it very seriously. And I think about like, hey, what's the potential fallout? I just talked about this yesterday on my Patreon. If you're rural, you're not a juicy target for anybody who's going to do an attack like this. You got to be in a tier 1 or tier 2 urban built up area because they're trying to maximize effectiveness. So that's the interpretation I get from it. I don't know too much about the tier 1, tier 2 breakdown.
So I'm going to read a little bit more here in a second, and I'll go to Jeff, but I want you guys to see this because you mentioned the increase in activity here recently. So the religionofpeace.com, I check them out several times a day because the updates are phenomenal. And as you can see right here, since 9/11, 47,844 Islamic terrorist attacks globally around the world. But what really stood out to me in one of the articles here, and I didn't make a note of the article itself, but the Religion of Peace essentially reported 17 attacks, 73 deaths, 60 injuries from terrorist activities globally in the past 72 hours. And that was a few hours ago when I sent the brief out to everybody. This are pretty big numbers at the end of the day. It's definitely going in the wrong direction. But Jeff, I want to share a little bit more here, and then I want to get your thoughts on this. So ISKP continues to expand global reach, directing operational guidance towards sympathetic US-based actors through encrypted digital platforms. AQ maintains emphasis on symbolically disruptive operations and is believed to be coordinating efforts with ISKP for multi-domain, high-impact attacks. Intelligence indicates trauma centers are being scoped as part of a broader attack package, secondary to or concurrent with strikes on airports, rail terminals, churches, and synagogues. Tier 2 cities present elevated risks due to limited security infrastructure and slower tactical response windows. Open access trauma centers are viewed as vulnerable due to their operational tempo, lack of perimeter control, and high civilian density. Anticipated tactics include body and vehicle-borne IEDs at trauma center drop-off points, coordinated armed assaults, and potential hybrid attacks involving cyber disruption. While the U.S. intelligence community reports no confirmed plots at this time, alert levels remain elevated under DHS guidance. So, Jeff, do me a favor and pick that up and run with it and decode some of this stuff for us.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you a second tier city. Let's say compare New York City to Buffalo. New York City has 15,000 cops. If they were an army, they would be like in the top 20 in the world as far as number of soldiers. All right. So, and they've had experience with 9/11, the first World Trade Center bombing, everything else. Buffalo, New York, not so much. Not as many cops, not as much experience. And so if you have a higher chance of success in Buffalo, not picking on Buffalo specifically. So you have a higher rate of success. You can still get a lot of casualties. There's a lot of people in Buffalo, and you're not going to kill the whole town, but you have a higher chance of success if you're a terrorist to do that, because they are less likely to be able to respond quickly and effectively, rather than say people in New York, Washington D.C., Los Angeles. And then you pick what we would call a soft target, like a hospital. Not much in the way of security, maybe a couple armed security guards. That's about it. Again, a lot of people come in and out. Very easy to get mixed into the crowd. If you're going to do a suicide bomber, all you got to do is run in there with someone in a wheelchair saying, "My wife's having a baby." Everybody's going to clear out for you, and then bang. But the other thing, though, is especially if you're in a city if you pick like the busiest trauma center in a city and then that's your target, really screws up the response, because then they go, where do you take the victims? You've just blown up the best place to take them. And what it does is it spreads even more chaos. So, from a terrorist perspective, a lot of that makes perfect sense. Now, if it is Iran, they're trying to get even for us blowing up their nuclear sites. A complicated attack like that is going to require planning. So it's not like we're going to bomb them on Tuesday and they're going to blow something up on Wednesday. They'll take their time. Remember, Salman Rushdie, he published the Satanic Verses in 1988.
Yeah.
He just got attacked again, a year ago? Lost an eye. They're patient. He's had a fatwa against him the entire time. And I can guarantee you they got one on Trump too for killing Soleimani.
And I can guarantee you it's all fun and games till somebody loses an eye.
That's right.
Anyway.
But yeah, they think, we think in terms of years, they think in terms of centuries.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I want to read just a little bit more, Randy, and then get your input. For those of you who aren't aware, before Randy was a Green Beret, he was a paramedic. So trauma centers are something he has some familiarity with. But like I said, let me just give you a little bit more details here. So ISKP and AQ have converged operational interest in attacking U.S. civilian infrastructure. The Islamic State Khorasan province, known for brutal attacks in South and Central Asia, has issued increased propaganda calling for domestic U.S. action. AQ, though quieter, has retained strategic patience and continues to develop high-profile plans using decentralized operatives and affiliated cells. And we reported on that yesterday as far as Osama bin Laden's offspring and their offspring is concerned. And Patreon smoked our SITREP yesterday because they said we were spreading unfounded rumors about the bin Laden family. I kid you not. They smoked our Patreon SITREP for that very reason. Anyway, online reporting and classified indicators suggest trauma centers are considered initial strike targets, possibly used to slow emergency response, as Jeff just mentioned, and create widespread panic. However, the scope is more expansive. Intelligence points to parallel targeting of transportation hubs, airports, Amtrak stations, and Greyhound terminals, alongside symbolic soft targets, including houses of worship. Tactical expectations include VB IEDs placed in loading zones or commercial entrances. What's a VB IED?
Vehicle-borne improvised explosive device.
Okay, thank you. BBIED suicide vest. That one's kind of self-explanatory. That are presently undetectable at most screening stations. I want to hear everybody speak on that after Randy gets his shot here. Shooters exploiting security gaps in reception or ER waiting areas, secondary attacks of first responders, coordinated distractions at transportation nodes to draw emergency response away from hospitals, hostage taking in synagogues and churches during peak services. The emphasis remains on tier 2 cities with weaker counterterror posture. These cities present attackers with high impact and lower resistance, enabling longer time on target, and higher casualty potential. So, Randy, I'm dying to hear your thoughts on this, especially from a paramedic's perspective, because when I read this earlier today, the first thing that popped into my mind is the bad guys rolling into a hospital in a stolen ambulance loaded up with explosives like Timothy McVeigh. You're on mute, Randy.
Sorry, forgot about that. Yep. Well, I was going to say, I'm glad you asked me in that respect, because really, you know, both Jeff and Mike have a world more experience than I do in all this stuff, the intelligence collecting and all that. But, you know, I was going to say something along the lines of what Jeff did, and that's from a medic standpoint of being on an ambulance. They certainly could load up an ambulance and pull up and blow up the ER dock, right? That definitely is one thing that will produce a lot of casualties. But they're also right next to the emergency room department. So if it's a big enough blast, it takes out the entire emergency room. And then you got to realize, as they mentioned, you know, then you're going to have to, all the load that would have went to this main hospital is now going to have to pushed off on these little ones, which one, they're not even going to be supplied to really do, because they're not geared that way. And they're not going to spend the kind of money to stock up on the stuff that they don't normally do. And then I also thought about, you know, things that you've mentioned sometimes, like the coordinator. Go ahead.
Well, no, I'm curious. Give me an example of something that these smaller centers wouldn't have on hand or wouldn't stock up on.
Well, what I mean is, you know, the other, like the bigger ones are going to take more of the trauma, right? So they're going to have more of those trauma bandages. They're going to have more of the products for that type of thing. And then some of your outerlying hospitals end up getting in their own little niche, so to speak, into what, like in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, that's definitely how it is, because there's quite a few hospitals in this area, quite a few big trauma, level 1 trauma centers, but then you have all these outerlying that kind of do other different little specialties and stuff like that. But you shut down that main one, the others, you know, aren't going to be able to handle the load. And you got to realize what that means is more people are going to die. You know, you'll have less casualties survive that event for that reason. And just like they mentioned, this is going to cause chaos, because then everybody's going to try to figure out where to go. And when all the rest of these hospitals start filling up with patients in the emergency room, then where do you take them? You know, it becomes a big problem. And if it's a smaller area that doesn't have as many hospitals as this, you would be in dire straits. I mean, you would have no medical facility basically to be able to facilitate handling whatever the load is. Certainly if, like we mentioned, if these are coordinated attacks, like maybe that was the first boom, and now whatever emergency services are left are going to rush to that hospital, and now you have them attack a school or a couple other things around the area, and then they almost got free reign. And then the amount of casualties that'll stack up from that because they took out the trauma center.
Well, and a lot of these, just to build on what Randy said, a lot of these cities, you'll have one primary emergency room for those kind of things. In Atlanta, it's like Grady Memorial. If there's a shooting, they always end up at Grady Memorial. It's a big hospital with an emergency room, but they also have, that's where the expertise is when it comes to gunshot wounds and things like that, because they tend to handle it all. The smaller hospitals, they may have an emergency room out in some suburban hospital, but they're used to dealing with, kids choking on lollipop wrappers and broken arm from falling out of a tree. They don't get as many, gunshot wounds and that kind of, like military type trauma. So if you take out the expertise, the rest of them are kind of like going, oh,
no, yeah, he's right about that, because 911 and you're the shoot, what are they called? Your I even did it, man. It just skipped right out of my head. But basically, you're the dispatch, right? Your dispatches will handle that. And if you called in like on a normal day, if an ambulance is trying to rush a gunshot wound to one of those little hospitals, well, they don't even do that anymore, because they know that hospital will say, no, we can't handle that. You need to take them somewhere else. They'll do that in the dispatch part, and they'll gear you that way. So he's right. They will have no experience in doing that kind of trauma.
So the first thing that came to mind was a conversation Mike and I had, and we were discussing drones in a different context, but he said, what happens if the bad guys hit, a less valuable target with the drones, and that everybody gets deployed to that area, law enforcement, first responders, then they come in with the big package and they attack something that's even more valuable. Mike, do you want to roll with some examples on that? And then I've got a last little bit of this SITREP to share.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest points of kind of all these talking points that we're talking about is this is a comprehensive attack. This is a planned strategy. It's deliberate. And the difference between deliberate attacks that we haven't seen before is like the difference between a patrol officer's interaction in a traffic stop under normal circumstances and the North Hollywood shooters, right? Two losers in 1997 go out with SKSs and AKs hopped up on whatever they're hopped up on, and they create this catastrophic event that documentaries, movies, and books are written about. And it's like, that's not even a formidable foe. I would always ask the question, because they injured 12 officers. I use it as a talking point, that hiding behind vehicles is one of the worst things that you could do, because it's a bullet magnet. It turns a person target into a vehicle-sized target for a front sight post on a SKS. And that's why you have multiple officers that are injured, when you could just, instead of trying to go into a gun store to get a weapon and upgrade your situation out of your 357 Magnum, how about you take the up-armored vehicle that you're using to rescue officers and just run the dudes over, right? So it's like you learn a lot of lessons from these mini catastrophes. And the bottom line is America is not prepared for a comprehensive attack. And, you know, the targets that me and the guys hit typically were just run-of-the-mill, like just the normal bad, like if you could categorize low-level losers who are just trying to get their jihad on, not really a formidable foe. It's really easy to kill those guys. You take that and you take a guy who's trained in the Green Mountains of near Benghazi in Libya, who's 6'1", 215 pounds, who's been training at a training camp, who's equipped when he comes into the country with a suicide vest, grenades, a timed watch, a solo boots, and a AK that's actually zeroed with an optic. You're talking about a type of attack that the world has never seen. And it doesn't take much incremental elevation of training capability to get there. But again, we're used to the mundane, the pattern of life that we're living in, which is, you know, unicorn farts and rainbows. You take one person who's capable, who's trained, who has the the religious conviction to give his life in combat and blow himself up. You're talking about a war and a campaign and a potential fight that most people have never seen. And that happening in a city, I know, because I train police officers, they're not prepared. Most law enforcement agencies aren't prepared for this type of thing. They talk about it, they try to rehearse it, they practice it on whiteboards and PowerPoint presentations, but they're not prepared for something like this. I would take this very seriously if I was an institution, but also if I was a civilian. If I was living in a neighborhood attached to a city or an urbanite in a city, and you're not prepared for this type of thing, you'll just be a victim. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, that's crazy. Before we go on to the rest of that SITREP, Mike, I'm just curious if you have any insider knowledge on these undetectable suicide bomber vests. I'm seeing them mentioned more and more frequently the past few months. And they're saying that the bad guys can wear these, you know, through TSA checkpoints, et cetera, et cetera. Do you have any insight on those? I haven't found anybody yet who has.
Well, just a little bit about the core of that. The core curriculum of that conversation is based on ingredients. And I've been to, I feel like I've been to every training course that both, at least I had access to in the agency and also in the military, that I could go to, including HME courses, homemade explosive courses. And what I'll tell you is there's specific ingredients that are detectable. And it's not very difficult to replace those ingredients that are detectable with ingredients that aren't. And the reality is, you know, if you're looking for the X-ray machine of the dude wearing the vest with nails embedded in his vest, yeah, sure, that's a thing. But these guys have gotten more savvy, and there's undetectable plastic type explosives that could be body worn, built, made into charges, made into explosive devices that can wreak havoc, that aren't detectable, with the technology that law enforcement is typically using, or TSA is typically using. That's all I can say about the specifics of it. But again, it's like, can you imagine one dude? I mean, look at the Boston Marathon bombers. I mean, these dudes use pressure cookers and basically Paladin press books and references in order to build this out. So one person with one motivation, with a little bit of capability, and getting something across the finish line would not be that difficult to do. I mean, we're really complacent as a nation when it comes to national security, but especially in just public security. I mean, we talked about the compromising of drones. How many did you say drones infiltrated NFL games last year?
Over 2,400 drone intrusions on NFL stadiums last year.
It's insane. If one of those had any type of munition or aerosol type chemical device, man, I mean, it's too easy nowadays.
So we had an offline conversation just to share it with y'all. And Mike said to me, so how about when these drones come and they're loaded up with something like aerosolized fentanyl, anthrax, whatever, and we shoot them down kinetically, and then that disperses the payload. You know, I hadn't even thought of that's a nasty way to go. And when Mike's mentioning plastic and other things that are not detectable in X-ray machines, that would be something like this. So this is a 3-sided G10 dagger that's super strong, super sharp, and pointy. You could do a lot of damage with that, and it will not trigger an X-ray machine.
Remember the GWOT controversy, guys? Like, the biggest controversy back in the day with GWOT was that you can get them through airport security. And for a period of time, I have a 1980s model, like a first-gen Glock. For a period of time, that was true. You could break them down. You could hide certain components that would be detectable, and there are certain components that aren't. And, they gotten smarter with polymer detection, and then paying attention to the shape and size of things. Mm-hmm. But, man, there's always ways to mitigate and get around this tech.
It's kind of like whack-a-mole, basically.
And I was just going to say that, as he mentioned law enforcement and how unprepared they probably are today, that we've, certainly in the United States over the last 5 or 6 years, for sure, we've cooked up the right environment for that. We've our press and politicians have eviscerated law enforcement. Dudes have been put in prison. So we're cooked up to the perfect time where they're not prepared. And with something like this happens, and then it also speaks to what we've talked about several times in the past couple of weeks about how our enemies, certainly even the ones that are poor dirt farmers, they're elevating their game of play. They're getting better. They're getting, just like this comprehensive attack. This isn't like the normal back in the day type of stuff. All of our enemies are elevating their levels, and it seems like they're getting some sort of formal training, I would say, somewhere.
Yeah, agreed. So a little bit more from this SITREP to coming to you, Jeff. So courses of action, most likely course of action, ISKP and AQ continue propaganda and planning without immediate execution. U.S. Homeland Security posture remains elevated, increased surveillance, threat monitoring, and localized threat interdiction preempt larger attacks. Most dangerous course of action, simultaneous attacks occur on trauma centers, transportation hubs, and houses of worship across several Tier 2 cities. These coordinated strikes cripple emergency response systems, cause mass casualties, and strain federal response capacity. We reported on this almost 3 years ago with regards to swarm attacks. Least likely course of action, successful international interdictions disrupt operational command nodes, neutralizing plot leaders and reducing capability. Threats diminish, allowing resumption of routine security postures across domestic infrastructure. Jeff, we'll wrap up this topic with you and your thoughts. You're on mute.
The worst case scenario is, okay, obviously the worst case scenario. We don't have to go into good gory details about it. And the best case scenario is they don't do anything. But it's the one at the top where they say they keep talking, they keep getting out there, we keep staying on alert. Well, as Mike and Randy will assure you, you can't have troops on high alert 24/7, 365. Because high alert then becomes just routine. And people get lackadaisical, people get lazy, people get, it's just like if someone comes in to you every day and says the sky is falling, first couple of days you might get panicked. And then after a while, yeah, right, sure. Just like it was falling yesterday and the day before and the day before that. It ain't falling. People get complacent. And it's not their fault, it's just human nature. It's like, you know, if someone warns you about some horrible thing every day and it never happens, you quit taking them seriously. So keeping the military or keeping our responders on high alert for an extended period of time actually degrades their readiness. It doesn't enhance it. So then when you do finally do something, they're less effective than they would have been.
Yeah, that's well said. So the next one is a short one, and I'm going to give it to you, Jeff, because then we're going to get into more of a discussion around Syria. And the reason I wanted to give this one to you is because it mentions Boko Haram, and you're the only person that I've actually had a conversation with on Boko Haram. So suspected terrorist kills 75-year-old farmer in Borno, July 17th, yesterday, by the way. It's all very current stuff. Suspected Boko Haram terrorists have shot and killed a 75-year-old farmer, Bukar Tijani, while he was working on his farmland in Kadunga local government area of Borno State. Counterinsurgency media expert Zagazola Makama learned that the incident occurred about 12 p.m. on Wednesday, according to a relative of the deceased. The victim was ambushed and shot in the back by the assailants while tending to his farm. The troops of Operation Hayden Kai were immediately alerted and mobilized to the scene. The team documented the scene and evacuated the victim to the general hospital in Kadunga. He was subsequently referred to the state specialist hospital in something, where he was confirmed dead on arrival by medical personnel. So there's been a fair bit of activity recently by Boko Haram. It maybe just cover the background on Boko Haram, who they are, what's their beef, and why are they, you know, a terrorist organization?
Well, they're an Islamic terrorist organization in West Africa, mostly sub-Saharan, in that kind of grassland between the Sahara and what people think of the jungles of Africa. They've been very active over the years. They have gone in and they're the ones that will go in and they'll kidnap 50 school kids at a time. Their main thing is if you're not Muslim and you're not hardcore Muslim, you're an infidel, and therefore it is their responsibility, their job. Allah tells them that they should go out and kill you. So they are they're guys they're still living in the 8th century, that 8th century mentality.
Wow. I appreciate the recap on that. So next one up is another longer sit rep from American Kinetics, and this is Syria. So it's essentially titled All You Need to Know About the Conflict in Syria. So a deadly sectarian conflict erupted in Suida, Syria between Druze militias and Bedouin tribal fighters, escalating into full-scale violence involving Islamist elements, Syrian government forces, and a direct Israeli military intervention. The bluff, bottom line up front, a sectarian flashpoint in southern Syria has escalated into a complex multi-actor conflict with reports of atrocities against Druze civilians, sparking Israeli airstrikes on Syrian regime and jihadist forces. The situation remains fluid following a ceasefire agreement reached under U.S. and Turkish pressure, but risks of renewed fighting persist. The conflict was triggered by the abduction of a Druze merchant on July 11th, prompting retaliatory violence between Druze militias and Bedouin tribes. By 13th of July, sectarian fighting spread across Suida with at least 30 to 50 fatalities and over 150 injuries reported in early stages. Syrian regime forces entered the area but were accused of colluding with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, and attacks against Druze communities. Graphic evidence of atrocities, including executions, humiliation rituals, and abuse of Druze civilians, circulated online, inflaming tensions. Israeli launched airstrikes on July 15th, targeting Syrian military and jihadist positions in Suida and Damascus, citing the defense of the Druze minority. So, Randy, if you had a chance to look at this, share your thoughts. If not, we can pass it off.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, the region is destabilized, man. You know what I mean? Even when Assad, or whatever his name was still in charge, he only had little bitty pieces of the country, right, and control. And this part of the world, these people have lost their mind. And, we've watched what ISIS did. And, now I think that they'll all think this is how you get something done. If you want to take charge, you want to be the ones in charge, you just go out and slaughter enough folks and take over the area. So we're probably going to see a lot of strife in this area. And that's all. If somebody else has something else to add, they're more than welcome.
Well, I'll go to you, Mike, on this one. I'm curious what your thoughts are in the situation in Syria. It just seems to be going from bad to worse. And if memory serves me right, the leader of the country now, he was either part of AQ or part of the people who broke off and formed ISIS at one point in time. And now he's trying to, change his spots like a leopard sort of thing. And now he's wearing a suit and stuff and presenting himself as a statesman as opposed to a terrorist.
Yeah, that's the complication with this region. I mean, you see it. I mean, really, every major Islamic region that has had a government collapse, that doesn't have a good ecosystem, doesn't have a good tourism cash crop, they're very tribal. They're very nomadic. I mean, when I was in Libya, I've replicated the same experience in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Pakistan. It's all the same. Very tribal, Iraq's a great example because it's within the last, it's recent in our minds as far as the guys who have fought there, but we experienced the Sunni Shia dilemma, right? I mean, Saddam Hussein put the Shia population after the fallout, Muqtada al-Sadr, and he took and seized that opportunity. And every time we went into Sadr City, which was basically a blockaded, it was literally surrounded with concrete. We called it the wall build. It's the same sniper op that Chris Kyle had that we were handed over. We saw the issues that the Sunnis and the Shias were having. They were blowing each other up. Iran was feeding the Shias to blow us up, which is, Randy's a testament to that. It's all very complicated. And at the same time, we go in there with our influence, wads of cash, and I experienced this with the agency, with the NSA, and then myself as an employee with the agency. We're just trying to see who has the most power and influence, and we're trying to manipulate things on the battlefield. 10th Group experienced this early on with Kurdish forces in northern Iraq. We had a lot of commitments that we abandoned. Ho Chi Minh is a great example with the Office of Strategic Services and before the Vietnam War kicked off. He was trained with us. So it's all complex. It has a lot to do with battling factions and old tribal relationships that go back hundreds, if not thousands of years. So will it stop? No. Will we get these people to be democratic like us? Is that dude coming to the White House in a couple weeks in his suit going to change things? No, it's not. And there's a hope for that, but there is justification for that big fat thumb of Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi. Name the person who's been looked at as the dictator, the bad guy, and controlling a really radical population of extremists. Gaddafi hated Al-Qaeda. I heard stories from guys who were there where he would surround an entire hotel with tanks and basically take out each level top down until nothing was left because he wanted to demonstrate how much he hated extremism from Al-Qaeda, where women were going to college and we're providing protection for him as bodyguards. Not saying he was a good dude, but just saying, like, when you're looking at progression in a region, now it's Sharia law back in Libya. And I have a year in Libya. I spent a year, 6 months as a Green Beret and 6 months as a CIA contractor there. And they've been blasted back in the Stone Age, and they're starting and resetting the wheel. So it's just something that happens every region, and you could take that and replicate it all over the world.
Yeah, I would just add for our audience's sake, Mike, being a Green Beret operator, was in Libya when Benghazi went down, and was one of the many guys who wanted to go in and was denied the opportunity to do that, thanks to our crooked State Department at the time. Who was that again? Oh, yeah, Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
I'll mention one quick thing that's related to this. So my brother-in-law was Navy Intel for a number of years. He ran the desk for Bahrain, and he said the same thing as what you just said. He said there will never be peace in the Middle East, and they're all bad, but they're different levels of bad. And our job at the time, and I'm sure it's true till today, was to track all of the weapons that were the highest grade and make sure that the least of the bad guys was the one in possession of them and not the worst of the bad guys who might use it on, us or Europe sort of thing. Definitely crazy situation. I want just a little bit more information on this Syria thing here. I wanted to mention that since July 11th, there are 260 dead, according to SOHR, with the potential for further violence if the ceasefire collapses. So again, this started on July the 11th and progressed through all the stuff I've already mentioned. And when we come down to here, U.S. officials, while coordinating with Israel, publicly called for restraint and urged all parties, including Syrian forces and HTS fighters, to withdraw from Ceuta. Under American pressure, Syrian government units pulled out of the city late on July 16th, and a new ceasefire was tentatively agreed to with Druze leadership. And then who are the Druze? Well, Jeff explained that last night, and I'm going to Jeff here to explain it one more time. I just want to hit on the courses of action. Most likely course of action: ceasefire holds temporarily as all sides regroup. Sporadic violence may continue in surrounding areas, but international mediation reduces large-scale confrontations in the short term. Most dangerous course of action: ceasefire collapses. Syrian regime and jihadist factions renew coordinated assaults on Druze areas, prompting an expanded Israeli air and ground campaign. Regional war increases, dragging in Iran-backed proxies and complicating U.S. involvement. Least likely course of action: conflict de-escalates fully. Syrian government and rebel factions withdraw permanently, and international observers or peacekeepers are deployed with multilateral consensus. So, Jeff, very first question before you touch on the Druze, et cetera. Dang it, I lost my thought. My sometimer's is kicking in again. Sometimes it's kind of like Alzheimer's, just different. Sometimes I remember, sometimes I forget, and I forgot to write it down here. So go ahead and roll with.
Well, okay, just for background for those who weren't watching the other day, the Druze are a sect of people. They are 1,000 years ago. They kind of broke off from Shia Islam, but they are not considered Islamic. They don't consider themselves to be Islamic. They do believe in Abraham and one God and all that. So they're a child of the book, just like Christians and Jews and Muslims. But they are not, traditional Muslims like Sunni, Shia, Sufis, Salafis, none of that. And they are in that region, have been in that region for 1,000 years. They tend to be insular. They don't, they kind of discourage marrying people from outside of the faith and all that. So they try and keep to themselves. They've been there for a long time, but that area has so many different people in it. You've got Shias, you've got Sunnis, you've got Christians, you've got Druze, you've got Mennonite Christians, you've got, it's a hodgepodge. And there's a reason why so many of these Middle Eastern countries have, for lack of a better word, a dictatorship or a dictator, a strong man in charge, because it takes a strong man to keep all those people in check. Saddam was that strong man for Iraq, and you look at what happened. I hated Saddam, but you look what happened to him. When he goes away, the place falls apart. Same thing in Libya. What has held Egypt together all these years is you had Nasser. Then after Nasser, you had Sadat. After Sadat, you had Mubarak. So in the last 40, 50 years, they've only had really three leaders. Now they got al-Sisi, who is another strong man. But you got to have a strong man to kind of hold it together. And they're not good guys, they're just the least bad guy. And sometimes that's all you can hope for. And the example I use in Europe is Francisco Franco. Yeah, Hitler helped him get to power. Yeah, they had the Civil War. He won the Civil War, but eventually he joined NATO. And yeah, he was a dictator, but you know what? He kept a lid on it. And you never heard of, once he took charge of Spain, you didn't hear about any more civil wars in Spain or anything else, because they had a strong man who kept a lid on it.
So I remembered my point. I was just going to ask for your opinion of it. I haven't seen a lot of coverage on this, but apparently Israel went in with a ground force, and they're holding southern Syria, and Netanyahu's saying they're going to camp out and stay there just to keep the danger away from their own border. Have any of you?
Yeah, they've been there for weeks.
Yeah, I didn't realize they actually had an encampment, though, that were actually holding on to land there. So
Yeah.
moving on to the next one here, actually just a quick summary on the global threat environment. Right now, it's just like all of these guys have said, it's complex, it's multifaceted. You've got terrorist groups continuing to adapt their tactics with the vests and everything else that goes with it, exploiting vulnerabilities in various sectors, including maritime security, online platforms. This is all stitched together as far as the cyber and everything else that goes with it. But I want to pull another group up here. I've only recently been hearing about these guys. And Randy, I'm curious if you have any knowledge on them. If not, we'll go to Mike. But I kept seeing this acronym TTP, Tariq-e-Taliban. And in this particular case, this is in Pakistan. And there's some color coding as far as where they are and have the most influence. But the Taliban is a Sunni Islamic nationalist and pro-Pashtun movement founded in the early 1990s that ruled most of Afghanistan from 1996 until 2001. The movement's founding nucleus, the word Taliban is Pashto for students, was composed of peasant farmers and men studying Islam in Afghan and Pakistani madrasas or religious schools. The Taliban found a foothold and consolidated their strength in southern Afghanistan. I won't bore everybody with the rest of it, but dropping down to the last paragraph, Batullah Mashoud, the first TTP leader, died on August 5th, 2009. His successor died 2013, blah, 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 blah. But they've been operating in the background for quite some time, and I've never heard of them until recently. Is there anything, Randy, you can share with us on this TTP?
Not specifically. I never went into Afghanistan operationally, so I will pass it. What I will say, though, is we haven't had friendly leadership there since the 70s.
Okay.
Ever since basically right before the Iran hostage scandal. You look in the 60s and 70s, they looked more like us. There were people walking around dressed like Western folks, but somewhere right before that 80s, when this thing kicked in and the Ayatollah took over, we haven't had a friendly leadership in Iran since then.
Thank you, Randy.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Afghanistan.
Afghanistan.
So, Mike, you've got any insight into this TTP? Are they kind of like an ISIS to Al Qaeda offshoot, something along that lines?
No, I think geographically, the way it works is you have Taliban, Pashtun elements in northern parts of Afghanistan, and then you have TTP, who operates mainly out of Pakistan. So they're in parts of, whether it's from Chitral down to Peshawar, they have free range of movement. And that's typically the guys that we were fighting all the time, because they would come into country, attack us, and go back across the border. And my multiple trips in Afghanistan, I actually think it's crazy. When you saw the August 2009, I was with A Squadron in Delta in Kunduz during that time period, and I'm pretty sure we killed some TTP guys. We did some vehicle interdictions on multiple borders, but I'm pretty sure that was part of our target deck. So it's not new to USASOC, it's not new to SOCOM, but the way I understand TTP is they're mainly operating out of Peshawar and that hinterland region of northwest Pakistan, at the time conducting attacks against in Nuristan province and Konar province, places like Kamdesh, Barakout, all the way down to Jabad, and really had free reign to do it. When we went into Kunduz and resurged into Afghanistan in 2009, it was the first time that USASOC at the tip of the spear had been back in country. And we were co-located with the Germans, for example, who hadn't left the wire in years. The first time we pushed them to get outside the wire, they hit an IED and lost 6 guys. The first time, because they basically were so complacent and so fearful of taking casualties against guys like TTP that they basically were sending false SITREPs saying everything was fine, everything was secure, when they were completely surrounded and saturated with rogue terrorist networks, to include TTP, that were operating in their backyard and had freedom of movement because nobody was doing anything about it. And then we realized, like, hey, the hornet's nest was still up and they had just surged back in, and everybody was sending friendly SITREPs saying everything's fine here. It's all peace. But they weren't proactive in going outside the wire, which is painting that picture, which was a huge strategic implication all the way top down. And we are replicating that will every 6 to 9 month rotations with Green Berets, every 3 to 6 month rotations with Delta Force and Ranger Battalion. But it's like, that's the reason here we are, 20 plus years later, talking about these organizations who are still operating and still doing pretty good.
Yeah, I want to just quickly address this. Do y'all kind of folks, telling us common folks, ever think that these terrorists are not taking notes on what y'all are saying? Everything that we share on air on Survival Dispatch News is what's called open source intelligence. If you want to spend the time to go and find this information, you won't have to work too hard. The same goes for the bad guys. We do at times have access to information that we cannot share, and we don't share it. So just want to set the record straight on that. Jeff, I want to get your thoughts on TTP. We are halfway through this podcast, and I don't want to take up everybody's time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the second half of this podcast, and I'm going to do it tomorrow by myself with all the updates so I can respect y'all's time. But I do want to hear the TTP stuff from you, Jeff.
Yeah, when I was up, I don't know if Mike was aware, I was the base chief up in Mazar-i Sharif in 2002. And when we took over the country in late 2001, early 2002, in the north, there were a boatload of Pakistanis who got left behind. Most of the Al-Qaeda guys bugged out and went to Kabul, but there wasn't enough transportation, so a lot of the Pakistanis got left behind, and they got wrapped up. And of course, if you talk to them, oh, I'm just a humble truck driver. Okay, what are you going to do if we let you go? Go kill Americans. Yeah, we're not letting you go. And they all ended up in a prison in Sheragan under the auspices of General Dosum, who was on our side. He was a drunk, but he was an interesting character. I knew him, met him.
That's not classified.
No, that's not classified.
Because the hall monitor might jump on you here.
No, a lot of people understood that. He's still alive to this day, as far as I know. But they were all over that area, and a lot of them are ethnic Pashtuns. The area in the north, you had Tajiks, ethnic Tajiks, and Uzbeks, and Hazara, and Pashtuns. Like Balkh was mostly Pashtu, but Mazar was mostly ethnic Tajiks. But they were all over that area, and they were hand in hand with the Taliban when they were running the country, hence the name. So they're really kind of a Pakistani auxiliary to what you think of as Afghan Taliban. They're kind of the Pakistan Taliban. They just aren't in charge of the country in Pakistan, where they are in charge of the country in Afghanistan. But they are not nice people.
Okay, appreciate that. So the last one that we're going to do before we hit the conflicted question is another brief from our friends over at American Kinetics. This is kind of interesting. It came out later this afternoon, by the way. TSA security relaxations amid elevated jihadist threats to the U.S. transport hubs. TSA ended mandatory shoe removal on July 8th, 2025. DHS is reviewing the 311 liquids rule, but hasn't changed policy yet. These shifts come as ISIS-K and AQ increase intent to target U.S. aviation, particularly via concealed explosives. The bluff, relaxing screening during a period of heightened terrorist intent without full tech upgrades, introduces risks. Plots involving suicide vests at U.S. airports exist, and threat actors remain committed to striking transportation infrastructure and other softer targets in the U.S. Key judgments. Passengers now keep shoes on unless alarms trigger. DHS may lift liquid restrictions pending tech validation. Christy Noam said that all the technology has been deployed in every commercial airport in the country. Maybe not, I guess. ISIS-K continues targeting aviation. 2025 plots, bomb production, and propaganda confirm active operations. Al-Qaeda's Inspire Guide circulates bomb designs meant to bypass security. Homeland threat remains elevated per DHS and DNI assessments, and their short SITREP is TSA relaxed protocol, citing new detection capabilities. Blah, 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 blah. Is the same as the stuff up above. Let's just quickly touch on the threat outlook and the potential action. So multiple outlets report U.S. airport vest plots that we just spoke about, and elevated jihadist intent and operational capability warrant concern. Intelligence suggests risk from both directed plots and self-activated lone actors emboldened by messaging. Most likely course of action, individuals attempt low signature bomb attacks exploiting relaxed procedures. Coordinated plot using shoe liquid bombs or insider assistance breaches TSA defenses, and complex multi-site suicide operation inside U.S. airports. So I'm going to go ahead and stop there. Randy, I'm going to come to you first for your thoughts on us. My understanding is, correct me if I'm wrong, that there was one report of one person doing something like building a bomb for their shoes, and that kicked the whole thing off, and there was never any other intelligence as far as exploding shoes was concerned. And we've had that in place now for something almost like 20 years. But give me your thoughts, Randy, with changing the SOP for entering secure areas at this time.
Well, I hope it's just what it said, that they have a new detection capability, right? And that's why now they can relax the standards, because now they can detect it, whether it be in shoes or in liquid. I think it was the same thing with the liquids, right? I don't know the way. We know the shoe bomber tried to get on a plane and actually use that. We have that in the records, but I don't know if anybody ever tried to get on with some type of explosive liquid, although I know there was some sort of intelligence about that, which is why, the 3 ounces or whatever it is we went to. But, I guess we're going to have to trust them, right? That they have a new capability in detection to where they can detect those now, whether it be in the liquids or the shoes. Other than that, we don't really have anything else to go by.
So before I go to Mike Glover, all I've got to say is trust nobody. Mike Glover, your thoughts on changing the SOP here?
Well, it's I always thought a lot of the knee-jerk reaction, especially with air travel, prioritized a lot of resources in one specific mode of travel that was likely not going to be a follow-up attack or strategy or plan for these global jihadists. I mean, obviously it hasn't been, because whether they were thwarted or their TSA's TTPs are working, you had 19 bombers that had box cutters. None of them had bombs. Like, there was no bombs. And so the focus, the resources, the allocation of all of our treasure to one specific mode of travel, where you, just like time allocation, I learned this as a young TL in the snipes in third group. You reallocate your time, or you reallocate your attention in one direction, you're giving something up, right? You can't gain something or focus on something without giving something up. And that's the first thing I think about when we do something like this. Sure, you could mitigate the future shoe bomber and those TTPs, but what are you opening up? What are you not paying attention to? And I am not big on the idea of violating a lot of people's rights for the sake of security. I think there's a debate and a conversation there. But for example, in our own backyard in Utah, and even in the big, beautiful bill, there's a massive amount of funds being spent in surveillance, big government surveillance. And there's a time and place for that. But I don't want to get a speeding ticket delivered to my mailbox because I like to drive my air-cooled Porsche a little faster down Provo Canyon into Utah. Like, I don't want to be monitored like that. And I think that there's a slippery slope there, but it's good to see them, whether it's, I think it feels like they're just making it up and making it more convenient to increase profits for air travel and flight, because there are definitely analytics that likely people getting held up or missing flights, etc. But it's good to see something happening here 24 years later, post them creating all these rules.
I wish I could remember who it was so I could give them credit for it. But years ago, somebody said to me, the first thing you do in life is decide what you want. The second thing you do is decide what you're willing to give up to get it. And everything comes at a cost. And so, Jeff, I want to wrap up on that topic with you and get your input on security protocols being changed.
I don't know what new technology they have and what they have deployed. I would hope that they didn't just say, "Yeah, let's quit doing this," but they've got, because there was Richard Reed. He did try to take down a plane with a bomb in his shoe. That's why we went through this nightmare. Although no one else in the world did it except us. But I think Mike hit on something, and it's like, and I'm with that too. It's like, I think it was Benjamin Franklin said, a person who's willing to trade freedom for security ends up with neither. And I'm one of those people like, oh, you're not willing to give up some of your freedoms for, A, B, C, D. No, I'm not. And you shouldn't be either. It's not a trade-off. It shouldn't be, you can have one, but not the other. You should be able to be secure and be free. And if not, I'd rather be free because I can take care of my own security. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's called being a Darwin candidate, right? So the left for years have loved to say, but if it just saves one life, it's worth it. You give up your civil liberties because it might save one dumbass who should be taken out by, Darwin's theory. That's the way I look at it, at least.
Yeah, it's like wrapping a car in bubble wrap because there's going to be one idiot that, he would die if you didn't. Well, that's Darwin at work.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to wrap up with the reader submitted story of the day. And this one was from Dale, the prolific Dale, on our private signal chat that all Survival Dispatch Guardians get access to. I'm not even going to read the stuff up top because he's going to say it himself and y'all get to hear this.
We don't say that Islam is here to live, to coexist.
This is in America, by the way.
With lots of different religions, and all of us can just hold hands and be friends. This religion was sent to dominate the world. It was sent to be superior, to extinguish the light of every other religion and to be superior to it. But we're not shy to say it, and we don't find that to be something that we should be shy to say, that this religion has been sent to dominate, to wipe out, to take out every other religion, to eclipse it, to be superior to it, to have the people leave every religion and to accept Islam. And if that requires fighting to achieve it, then it requires fighting to achieve it. Because the greatest purpose for which jihad was legislated is to make the word of Allah the highest and the word of those who disbelieve the lowest.
Randy, do you want to comment on that?
Well, it's what we've been saying all along, right? It's not the religion of peace. They're not here to assimilate. They haven't gone into any country. They're like the Palestinians, in fact. You allow Muslims into your country, all they want to do is reprocreate, get more there, bring more, have more, and then eventually take over. And we've seen that over and over and over. And again, you look at, as we just discussed in multiple layers throughout this one episode, there is no peace in the Middle East. And why is that? Because Islam is not a peaceful religion. It's not there to make peace with anyone. It's there to take over. And they are, it goes to something else we've said. When somebody tells you who they are, you should listen.
Absolutely. Mike, you want to add any closing thoughts?
No, I've killed or captured guys that look like that and have that same ideology. So you're going to find radical arms, extremist arms of every faction, but there's a lot of them in Islamic ideology. And it's sad because I've seen both sides of it. I've seen the people trying to profess peace, but it's hard to profess peace in a text that's so opposite of that and wants conflict, wants war, wants pedophilia, wants all the things. And if you take the literal translation of that, then and you grow up with that, it defines your purpose. It outlines your purpose. And there's a reason why young men are easily manipulated into this ideology, because who doesn't want 72 virgins and to get their jihad on promised eternity and eternal life forever? So it's a radical ideology, and it's going to be around forever. And that is the norm. Like, for people to say it's not the norm because peace is the norm, it's not. We've seen both sides of it. And I would tell you from my experience personally, even in places where we're not in conflict, that is the norm. That is.
Wouldn't you also say that it doesn't matter how peaceful all of them are? As soon as one radical moves in the neighborhood, every one of them change. Is that your experience, Mike? Or
yeah, one imam works into the neighborhood and starts professing it over the loudspeaker, he can radicalize everybody in one session. 1 4 o'clock prayer, everybody can be radicalized. And I know that personally firsthand from experience. I mean, it's wild, especially my time in Yemen, where you have, I think, the most vulnerable population of human beings with no cash crop, no hope for a future, nothing to live for. You get one person to come in a clean robe, coming from another country, speaking the right tongue, he's going to radicalize an entire neighborhood, everybody who could hear that loudspeaker. And it's not hard to do, which is why Al-Qaeda has been so successful. And with Inspire and all these things, they've been turning into periodicals and radicalizing the entire generation. Look at ISIS. Look how fast and rapid that movement mobilized. It's because there's more people looking for purpose than there are in other religions and other parts of the world, and they're the most vulnerable of the populations. It's easy to turncoat.
Somebody in the live chat was asking questions around IQ. So the numbers I've seen, go look it up yourself if you want, punch it into an AI, that the average IQ in Yemen is 70, and it has the lowest average IQ of any country in the entire world, 70. Once it hits 69, it's considered retarded in America here. And
I've seen it. Like, that's the most horrible. I spent a year in Yemen with the agency, and it is the most radical place I've ever been.
And they're all stoned on cot.
Oh yeah, all of them are high on cot. That we used to joke that the state or the country bird was the red cot bag, because it would literally fly everywhere the wind blew. You would see red bags flying. You're like, oh, that's the country's bird. It's the red cot bag.
that's awesome.
It's terrible, man.
It's just part of their culture. And man, they'll be high on that stuff. They'll start early in the morning. They'll be chewing cot all day. I knew
my favorite, Jeff, was
colonels who were stoned on cot at 2 p.m.
My favorite, Jeff, was when the chief of base would approve the case officers to chew cot with an asset, and then we go sit on them for 12 hours, because as soon as they get the cot in, they're going. I mean, it's like the Adderall of the natural world.
Yeah.
Wow.
I've never chewed cot. Thank you very much.
Right on. LAPD SWAT, thank you for the $10 tip. Jeff, could you answer this question before we do the conflict question? He's asking, would you consider Fort Worth a tier 2 target city? Did the military special ops community study the LAPD shootout from 1997 bank robbery? So I'll let you comment on that, Jeff, and then conflict, and we're done.
I would almost consider Fort Worth a tier 1, just because of so much defense contractors and stuff that are there. You've got the huge Lockheed Martin plant. That's where the F-35s are made and the F-16s are made. You've got, Bell Helicopter is a big facility there. I mean, there's a lot there. And it's a big city, and it's part of the Dallas Metroplex. And the Dallas-Fort Worth area, I look as one big city, and it is most definitely a tier 1.
Yeah, and you can include Denton with that. I would say Waco is probably more lines with like a tier 2 city as well.
I wouldn't do Waco, man. Those are all Army dudes.
But the size. I'm just talking about the size of it.
Yeah.
It's more, that would be, I think, more of a tier 1, although he's right. I don't know that I would pick Waco for the target either, but there are plenty of places the size of Waco out kind of.
Yeah.
Because it's 2 hours out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Military in San Antonio.
Oh, yeah. You don't want to go there either.
Yeah. That's a good place to commit suicide if you're a terrorist.
Yeah.
There you go. All right. So we'll end up here with the conflicted question of the night. Grocery stores and mini marts have been ransacked of all food. Your group is low on food and is in desperate need of resources. What other locations would you start looking for food or possible supplies to barter with? Randy, I'm going to go to you first.
Man, I would say, for barter purposes, just from my time in the military, alcohol and tobacco products, when those things run out, you would not believe the things that people will do just to get even a pack of cigarettes. And I wasn't a smoker and I didn't dip, but I wish I'd had a whole tack box or 2, maybe, full of tobacco products. I could have made myself independently wealthy.
Yeah.
Just selling the cigarettes when we ran out, and then you think of, here's reality though. As I mentioned before, I saw what happened the 3 days we let people loot in Baghdad. And after 3 days, there's not going to be anything left anywhere. You can try to go to food banks. You can go to grocery stores. You can go to churches. You can go anywhere. You can go to nurseries, anywhere that might even have a little bit of food, and all that's already going to be gone. So it's going to come down to bartering, I think. And, you know, the more products that you have that people use that run out, again, like tobacco or alcohol, you will have some actual power. You know what I mean? Because people will trade a lot for that.
Yeah, exactly. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment on cigarettes. I've seen it in Africa. If you're familiar with the Marlboro Man, who is Mokhtar Mokhtar, really famous dude. I think he married a Algerian princess or something. Like, there's a whole bunch of mystique behind him. I remember we targeted him, and we actually geolocated him in Mali, and were denied. I wasn't on the op. One of my buddies was on the op, pretty famous guy in the community, and winded up locating him. But he had a whole ring built out by smuggling in cigarettes, and then basically building a terrorist network and really a global network based on the trade and selling of cigarettes. I mean, he controlled the trade and really treated it like gold, right? Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind in that question is distribution centers, like Cisco. Cisco controls 44 million square feet, 44 million square feet in the U.S. alone of distribution centers that distributes all the meat, seafood, dairy, eggs, fruits, vegetables, all the food that you get to a grocery store, restaurant is likely distributed through Cisco. And if I'm going, like most people's default is go to Walmart, pillage Walmart. I'm going to the unlabeled 172 Cisco distribution centers in America that are likely to have more on hand than any place in any community. And the only way you'll probably know where they're at if you're doing a drone recce is they got all the semi trucks backed up to them.
Yep.
Wherever you see semi trucks running the log, that logistical supply chain, that's going to be the place. I would probably set up my FOB, my fire base, based on that building, and start building a perimeter around that entire thing. And you probably live a long time based off of what's in those Cisco centers.
Just do it quickly.
Yes.
Yeah, you better have it geolocated prior to even doing that.
The advantage is those places are like down in these industrial areas where people don't think of grocery
Exactly,
stores.
Yeah. And they're not labeled. They don't have big signs.
Industrial distribution centers. That was my top pick.
Yeah.
My second pick would be office buildings, especially government office buildings. It's highly likely you're going to find cafeterias and
anywhere where they serve three squares, at least for a period of time, you're going to get that distribution, that whether it's a jail, a prison, a camp, that's a good place to think about. A hospital, that's a good place to think as well.
I know you're not getting again the Pentagon, but how much did they spend on sushi, or what were some of those things that came out recently? It's ridiculous.
Starbucks.
Yeah.
The Starbucks at the agency. I can't imagine how much.
That's too
I'm a Dunkin' Donuts guy, so. No, I think one other place to look at is people only think people food. Think about like attacking feed stores.
Yeah.
They have huge bags of corn, just corn that you can grind up and eat, and crack corn, things like that. They also have, and people don't like the idea, but they have flats and cases of canned dog food. Yeah. Well, canned dog food's edible for people too. If it wasn't, it'd kill your dog, because pretty much anything an animal can eat, you can eat, as long as it's not hay. So, and those are things that might be overlooked. So I would go through there and look for any bulk things that I may not want to eat tomorrow, but when I get hungry enough, I'll eat it. Especially
you mean we can't eat grass, Jeff? We can't eat grass? No. So do you mean we can't eat grass, man?
Yeah, you can. It's just got to eat a lot of it to get the nutrients out of it.
Yeah, I know.
You can smoke it.
I guess there is some grass you can smoke. Might be a good barter item.
Yeah, there you go. All right. So I just counted 12 stories that we're going to skip for tonight. I'll probably blast something out, a recorded episode tomorrow quickly to cover all that stuff. But quick reminder to go to survivaldispatchnews.com, sign up for a free account. That's our Substack. We know that most platforms don't send notifications to our subscribers. 0 to 1% of our views come from notifications. If you go to survivaldispatchnews.com, you'll get our Saturday watch guide, has links to everything we publish for the week. You'll get our daily sit reps. So you don't have to pay to get value out of our Substack. But if you do pay $7.99 a month or $75 a year, get 2.5 months for free, you get an invite to our high traffic signal chat. Like sometimes there's 3,000 messages in a day in there. You get the full daily sit reps, meaning you get all the links to our sources, not just the sit rep itself. You get the Sunday threat matrix newsletter. You get our entire library of Survival Dispatch insider magazines. There's 37 of them. If you had them and nothing else, no internet access in a post-apocalyptic world, you would have enough to guide you through that process. And you also get it enrolled in SDENS, which is the Survival Dispatch Emergency Notification System. We lit it up last month when we hit Iran because we were concerned that there would potentially be retaliatory attacks here in the homeland. Don't forget to please support our sponsors. We do not get an affiliate commission. We get paid a monthly stipend by CCW Safe and Carnival and a couple other ones. And that means I don't have to punch a clock. None of our guys have to punch a clock to bring you the truth 6-7 days a week. Plus Mike Glover can tell you this is really good product. Same with Randy. I don't know if Jeff's had his hands on any yet, but
I haven't had it yet.
100% American meat, chicken, pork or beef, no mRNA, no hormones, no antibiotics, grass finished, not grass fed. And it's a 6-ounce bag, makes 1.5 pounds. It takes no time at all to reconstitute it. You can flavor it however you want. And I put a comment out there. I said, you know, it tastes so good, you'll eat your stockpile. Well, I ate the stockpile. It's all gone.
I'm in the middle of it. Hey, you know, wait a minute. We got one last thing to do. The audience participation. So put a 1 in the column if you think that we put out unclassified information. Put a 2 in there if you think we were actually divulging some classified information.
That is too funny.
Classified in 9 years.
Yeah. All right. So I appreciate you guys and all your insight, and I appreciate everybody who joined us for this live tonight. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. God bless America, and enjoy the closing video.
And they're using the word God again, and they're not hiding from it, and they're not being told to take it down, and they're not saying we can't honor God. In God we trust. So important.
Even in the darkest night, thank God for America. When it's time to stand and fight, thank God for America. Through every struggle, even when we fall, we answer to a higher call. It's time for us to unite. Thank God for America. The common man will get it right. Thank God for America. As the plans to divide us fade away, America's stronger every day. We will say His grace is shed on you and me. Thank God for America. We will always fight for liberty. Thank God for America. Though the clouds are dark, do not be afraid. For this time, purpose we will make. It's discernment and clarity that we pray. Thank God for America. More boldness and fearlessness every day. Thank God for America. Together